Don't quit on a story is a bad advice, because not every project we start has to be finished. We live in a culture where quitting is seen as a failure, but successful writers quit all the time. Salaam friends, I'm Mohamed, and in this channel we demystify the writing process and explore tools and habits that make it happen. Today I will be talking about a book by Seth Godin, The Dip, and is a business book that talks about strategies and tips that helps readers know when to quit and when to stick. And the way Seth Godin defines the dip is the point where the initial excitement about a project, about a story that you're writing fades away, and you enter that space where you stop believing on what you're working on, or you even lose track of where is it going. So before starting a new short story or writing a new novel, know that you will hit a point where you start doubting where it will all go. And once you arrive to the dip, then you have few tools here to examine for you to know whether you should stick with a project or quit it and spend your time on another one. First, you need to evaluate whether what you're working on is worth the trouble. Ask yourself, is it a short story? Is it worth the challenges that you will face when you are writing? Is it a novel? Does it have a connection to the other stories that you are writing? Or is it something that stands alone? And this is very hard to determine. Most of the time, we don't get to know what we are working on until the first draft. Because stories start as an emotion or a scene that you have in your head, or a character that speaks to you, or an idea that you have that you wanted to explore for a very long time. And the first draft gives you the blueprint for what the story is. And it is then when you will have enough material for you to decide whether you should continue working on this project or putting it aside. And if there is part of the story that speaks to you, then pick it up and develop it. But if the whole story is flat, then you don't necessarily have to unpack it or rewrite it. You might want to do so, and the driven part of you that wants to accomplish and check off the box of completing a story would want to go back and write it again and write it again. But you don't have to do that. Reflect on the opportunity cost. And this is the second tip that Seth Godin mentions. Ask yourself, what could you be gaining from quitting this project? Are there more promising ideas that you've had while you're writing this first draft? Are there other stories that you stopped writing long time ago and are worth more to go back to? Or maybe you've been working on a novel for a very, very long time and you can't just let it go because you've spent all this time on this research and this writing and you can't let it go. And quitting is not an option. And maybe you're right, but then you still have the opportunity to take a break from it. The author of The Book Thief, Marcus Zazak, when he wrote the book following The Book Thief, which is called Book of Clay, it took him 13 years, and it was one of the hardest books that he wrote. And he said at some point he had to take a 1-month vacation without thinking about writing, getting away from his country and returning to look at the book and the material he had written with fresh eyes. So once you're in the dip, you have two options, and this is the third tip, is either you embrace it and you persevere, or you quit and focus your creative energy on something else. Some other ways for you to find whether you should do that or not is getting other people's feedback. You can exchange stories with a writer friend and offer them feedback on their stories for them to offer you feedback on yours. I remember a question that my professor at the MFA program used to ask us all the time before we critique each other's work is, where is the emotional gravity of the story? And this pushed us not to only look at the story in terms of grammar, sentences, whether it makes sense as a structure and a plot, but it pushed us to look at the story from an emotional perspective to see where our attention is gripped. And finally, whether you decide to quit or stick, just know that there is a lesson in every story that you write. It is about adapting and evolving as writers. And with each project, it teaches us something about ourselves, the kind of habits that works for us, the time of day that works for our writing routine, the pace that we like to work under, and the kind of stories that we don't enjoy writing as well. So remember, the act of quitting does not mean giving up on your dreams. It's about knowing when to pivot and channel your creative energy. That's it for this video. And if you enjoyed it, then you would like my video here on the 3 habits that are ruining your writing routine. Thank you for watching, and keep writing.